Politics here at Houston Media Source, brought to you by Drug Policy.
This week in Drug War History, February 24th.
By talking a little bit about the news here that's been going on as far as drug policy reform goes. And Houston has become a little infamous in that 2 U.S. Air Marshals face federal drug charges, accusing them of using their positions to smuggle narcotics through airport security. The two marshals plan to smuggle 33 pounds of cocaine aboard a plane bound for Vegas in exchange for $67,000. Both men face 10 years to life in prison and a $4 million fine if convicted. In lighter news, UT Austin is planning a project SAFER, which is along the same lines and the same organization as that which was conducted in Denver, Colorado, and passed the I-100 initiative, keeping citizens safe from city police as far as marijuana possession convictions go. The students at UT Austin are asking administrators to ease campus penalties on smoking pot and put them on par with alcohol offense, saying the school has a responsibility to discourage alcohol-related deaths by taking the stand that marijuana is the safer choice. The effort was organized by Safer Alternative for Enjoyable Recreation, or SAFER, a year-old advocacy group that was started in Colorado in response to widely reported deaths of students from drinking too much alcohol. And we're very lucky today to have Jerry Epstein with us, who is one of the past presidents of Drug Policy Forum of Texas. He served as U.S. Marine Corps officer. He's been a businessman, a writer, and you have written extensively on several letters to the editors and published articles on drug policy reform news. And you were also one of the co-founders of Drug Policy Forum of Texas.
All correct.
Yes, and I guess your heart is also kind of embedded in Houston in that you went to Rice University and are an alumni of there and received your sociology degree master's from U of H. So welcome, Jerry. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Binda.
So can you tell us a little bit about Drug Policy Forum of Texas?
Well, essentially, we're formed to encourage public debate and discussion about what we can perceive to be the failure of the drug war. And we thought that that debate ought to be surrounded by scientific information. So the person that asked me to help him found the forum, Dr. Al Robinson, and professor of pharmacology for over 20 years and chair of the department at the University of Texas Medical School. So we hope to do that. And currently we have 9 speakers going around the state, speaking to Rotary clubs and whatever service organizations would like to. Kiwanis would be an example. And trying to convey the message that we need a broader dialogue because the drug war is not working and because it's creating a great deal of harm.
Okay. Awesome. And how can people find out more about Drug Policy Forum of Texas?
The website is DPFT.org.
Okay.
Dogponyfoxtrot.
Great. Okay, so you said you guys co-founded in 1995, and other than spreading the word and everything, what more can you tell us about DPFT? I know you guys have a speakers bureau, and so is that somewhere where people can use DPFT?
Anyone can contact us. There's at the website we have pictures of the speakers and their backgrounds, a number of competent people,
yeah.
And they can sign up or inquire through info@DPFT on the website and see how to contact us other ways.
Awesome. And I'm glad you said a number of competent people, because that's something that's always kind of struck me about DPFT. I had the pleasure of attending your annual meeting last month.
Yes.
And everybody who's a member of DPFT is basically someone who's, already been a successful person and hasn't necessarily been imbued in the drug policy business, until they kind of thought about it and realized, this just isn't working. They're business people. Dr. Al Robinson was, former pharmacology chair. Writers, professors, lawyers, engineers. So
there's a great variety of people, and we don't restrict it in any way.
Right.
So anyone who wishes to be a member is more than welcome.
Okay.
who shares our basic goal.
Right. And what is one of the basic goals?
Well, the basic goal is to increase discussion of alternatives to a failed drug policy. Okay. It's pretty simple, but it's a very hard thing to achieve. And very powerful people have attempted to crack what I perceive as, if you think of the boy in the bubble or whatever it may be, you can't get in there to criticize the drug war. It's been politically incorrect. That's beginning to show cracks all around, but very different from where it was in 1994. And these people include Walter Cronkite, was one of the people who was proposing a national commission back in 1995. From the other side of the political spectrum, William Buckley has been preaching about it. When Hugh Downs spoke to Barbara Walters in his last speech, last interview, he said the one story that he regretted that he hadn't been able or allowed to cover adequately was the failure of the drug war.
Really?
Yeah. And so it comes from all quarters, and it comes from Milton Friedman, for instance, is a Nobel Prize winning economist, and he's now past 90, and our friend Dean Becker actually had him on a radio interview just a year or so ago, but on the occasion of celebrating his 90th birthday, the president was there. And the president made a speech and thanked him for all his contributions, called him a hero of freedom. Alan Greenspan called him the most important economist of our last century.
Wow.
And this is a man that they listen to, obviously, who's had a profound effect on the concepts, at least, of small government, the concept of the power of the free market, and yet they won't listen to him when for 40 years he's been telling them that the drug war is insane, and can never work.
I mean,
George Shultz was there, and also agrees with him, and Paul Volcker, the types of people that the United States has looked to for leadership. George Shultz, the Secretary of State during the time when the Cold War ended and Russia fell. Paul Volcker, working out the problems of inflation at one of the most important periods in our economic history, and all of these people agree that prohibition is unsuccessful.
Right.
So it's wrong in our estimation that the general public not have exposure to their thinking, and that's what we're trying to do, is to let the public hear both sides of the story, not just the political rhetoric that supports the drug war today.
Right, definitely. There have been a lot of people that have outspoken about this issue, and one person, I believe we have a caller, so let's go ahead and take that.
Sure.
Good evening, Bindu and Jerry.
Yes.
Good evening, Dean.
Hi, Dean.
I wanted to underline the thought that yesterday the Wall Street Journal came out with that story.
Absolutely terrific.
That report, and basically called the drug war a farce, if I may say so.
Well, you're putting a few words into his mouth, but he certainly said we should be questioning prohibition, didn't he? Strongly.
Yes, he did indeed. And I think another report came out yesterday talking about the need. I'm drawing a blank here. I'm away from my notes. I apologize, but basically talking about the fact that we have walked away from logic in this, and nowhere is it more obvious than in regards to the religious right to use drugs of our choice, especially for sacramental use, and that yesterday's Supreme Court ruling, unanimous in regards to the ayahuasca use by the South American Church, underscored once again that as the Native Americans are able to use peyote for their religious ceremonies, so too are these South American religions able to use ayahuasca, which has DMT, a controlled substance, supposedly banned by the DEA, and yet the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that it was appropriate that these people be able to use ayahuasca for their religion.
Right.
I think it's becoming more obvious every day, I think, to the general populace. I think most people are still unwilling to speak up, to say too much in regards to, and again, I call it a farce. I think the whole drug war is a complete and utter, it's a sham, a scam, and we need to stand and proclaim it out loud that the emperor has no clothes. This week on Cultural Baggage, we'll have as our guest on KPFT radio 90.1 FM. Mr. Mason Tavert, as well as Steve Fox of the SAFER group, based out of Denver. They have managed to get a law passed in Denver that allows for 1 ounce of marijuana for adults to not be a crime. They're still busting people there under state law, saying that they just need to. But Mason and his friends are working to get that a similar law passed for the whole state of Colorado. And y'all are probably aware that SAFER was involved at the University of Texas in just the past couple of weeks in trying to get the administrators of the college to go about things differently, to not demonize and destroy the educational opportunities of their students if they're caught with small amounts of marijuana.
Right. I think actually the voting for that goes from February 28th through March 3rd. They've already collected 1,400 or the necessary amount of petition signatures. So, and even they asked the UT system administration what their commentary was if this was to pass, and they had no comment. Similar referendums have passed in University of Colorado Boulder and another Colorado university.
Now, what's kind of caught my ear there when you were talking, Dean, is the fact that when Dr. Robinson was thinking about forming DPFT, it was an interaction with college students in regard to marijuana that was one of his incentives, because he was on the board that selected graduate student entries. And at that time, the laws in Texas were sufficiently harsh that if a student had been convicted of marijuana possession, it was a felony, and they were not entitled to practice medicine in the state of Texas.
Oh, wow.
And so, fortunately, Dr. Robinson advised those students who came to him and said, what's the point of applying to med school if this is going to plague me? Dr. Robinson told many of them, you're good students, you have a good record, apply and let's hope the laws change, which fortunately they did. And he goes on to point out that many of those students that would have been banned by law from practicing medicine, are now major contributing physicians or practicing all around the United States. So that was just one of his incentives that was in his mind as he reached his retirement that inspired that. And of course what we now know is that many people are being disenfranchised in a lot of ways, and that records are something that follows a felon often throughout their life. We're putting a life sentence on people in some respects. Unfortunately.
And I'm curious, at the time, was the same true for, that would be on your record, and you wouldn't be able to apply to schools if you had, an alcohol-related...
No.
Yeah, so
no.
It was just...
The double standard is for alcohol is prevailed.
Place, is it not?
I'm sorry?
Will, hang up here in just a moment and listen in. I appreciate hearing you and seeing you on the TV. And I want to ask folks to please participate in bringing about an end to this drug war, this now approaching 92-year-old fiasco. You can learn more by visiting my website, which is on screen, drugtruth.net. There you can access more than 200 programs featuring judges, congressmen, scientists, doctors, lawyers, people from all over the planet who have examined this policy of drug war and seen it to be a hopeless failure. And please listen to Cultural Baggage on 90.1 FM right here in Houston, Fridays at 7 p.m. And thank you.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you so much, Dean.
Dean's done a terrific job of bringing the voice of some of the most well-informed people in the country to the airwaves. And what is 50 stations now, I think?
50 stations across the country on Pacifica Radio. Yeah. So
terrific.
One of my favorite stations around here. He's absolutely right. This has been a complete farce, and I think people who kind of think a little bit about the drug war think, maybe it is a good idea. But if you think a little bit more about it, you realize there's absolutely nothing good about this. People are being arrested at an alarming rate.
There's good intentions, and I think that we should understand at least that people are very rightly concerned about the tragedies of drug use. They're very real. And the people who began and prosecute the drug war for the most part, believe they're doing the best they can to stop them. And that's why it's so important for them to understand that the policies they've adopted do not decrease drug use and do a great deal of what in a war we would call collateral damage. So
Right.
That's it. The centerpiece, of course, of our drug policy is prohibition, and the center point of all prohibitions is to try to stop the supply of drugs.
Okay.
And when we poll the American people, first of all, you can ask them, are you satisfied with the progress and the way the drug war is being prosecuted? And they say no. They don't like the results. They don't think it's doing much. And then when you list things that they might want to do.
Well, what do you mean by how the drug war is being prosecuted?
Just how are, whatever it means to be fighting a drug war right now, okay? I'm just saying, in general, do you think the drug war does a good job?
Right.
If you're asking a citizen a pretty general question about a subject that they haven't thought a great deal about, except that they have a definite sense that the drug war is not doing well, certainly not meeting their expectations or hopes. And then the second thing is, when given a list of things that might be alternatives, what should we do most? What do they most approve of? It's stopping supply. And so, from my point of view, the first step for people to understand the failure of the drug war is to understand that stopping supply is impossible, and to understand the mechanics of why that's true and the implications of that failure. So we start, for instance, by looking back at history. And the first act of prohibition in 1914, essentially, the intention was to eliminate the drug from the face of the earth. That was the intention. And if you listen to the rhetoric, when alcohol was prohibited, you can hear a Treasury spokesman, the Treasury Department was in charge of law enforcement for alcohol prohibition, saying, very soon we shall live in a world that knows not alcohol. That might have been our first clue that that we were not going to get rid of
Wow,
alcohol.
That's a great foreshadowing there.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to continue on this vein of thought, but we have a caller right now, so.
Sure.
Hi, caller. Welcome to Drugs, Crime, and Politics.
Yeah, it's good to see you back, Jerry. I think we need to start talking about what we need to do to change what we don't like. And that is getting these people that are supposed to be our representatives the hell out of the office that they hold. People like Debbie Riddle, she doesn't represent the people. What's his name? Nixon, Joseph Nixon. This guy is pathetic.
He's up for re-election in November.
He said on the Democratic Power Hour on Thursday evening that the first time our medical marijuana bill got into the House, he's the one that stopped it behind the scenes. And when we had our last bill, this last legislative session, he said on that program again that he would do whatever it takes to make sure that bill would never get out on the floor. Now, these are the people that we need to vote out of office. We need, whether it comes down to civil disobedience, whether it comes down to flagging these guys everywhere they go, and put them on the spot. Make them come out and say how they don't think people on medical marijuana is of any value. And I think it's a big enough issue that it can be polarize people in our area. And I'll hang up and hear what you have to say.
Well, thanks, caller. Just first of all, in reference, he was referring to, I think it was HB 658, which last year was in Texas legislative session. And it wasn't even, as immense as the medical marijuana bills that California, Oregon, Washington, New Hampshire, and everything has passed. It was just in reference to allowing patients that have been told by their physicians, people that have been told by their physicians that it would necessarily help them, to use that as a medical defense, medical necessity defense in court if they were ever to be picked up for possession. And he's absolutely right. You know, you have if you take a bunch of people together, put them outside of somebody's, you know, a congressperson's office, you know, a bunch of people who are, you know, this helps them and everything, and they've been told by their physicians, then it's certainly going to make a stand. It's going to make a point that, you know, there are plenty of their constituents who are out there and, you know, support this kind of law.
Well, it's an extremely difficult situation, and the forum is not advocating any particular attack on any particular individual, but ultimately people are going to have to let their representatives know how they feel, and to understand that we had a poll in which 75% of Texans said that they supported medical marijuana, and to have no efforts made in the legislature to see that their constituents' wishes are answered is very disturbing, and it is something that we had to contend with when we went to the legislature and gave them the evidence in the subcommittees. We were able to convince the subcommittees to vote in favor of the legislation, but unable, unfortunately, to bring it to a vote when we were thwarted, not just on medical marijuana, but in other health care issues where one of the central points is that these decisions about medicine are being made by politicians and by policemen and not by the medical community.
Right.
And that's again, I think that's very much opposed to what people believe. What's also upsetting is that when we went to Austin a number of years ago and George Bush was the governor and we spoke to the governor's staff, they assured us that Governor Bush believed that the question of the medical use of marijuana was one that should be decided by the states.
Right.
And he does not feel the same way as the president,
no, not
as
at
he
all.
said, as governor. And that seems to me to be at least a clash of principle for those people who believe that regardless of how you might feel about the issue, it's a health care issue, and it's one that's properly decided according to the Constitution by the states.
Right.
And so those combination of things tell me that at least from the perspective of the opponents, something more than usual politics is at work, and I don't know exactly what. It's always been something we've discussed for a long time, but it's a troubling proposition when a large majority of the voters want something and the politicians know it in the polls and still won't vote. So who's getting what and for what reasons, or what secondary things are going on in their minds?
There are a lot
I
of
have no idea.
representatives. Yeah, there are a lot of representatives who are unwilling to speak about it and to speak openly about it. You're absolutely right. The polls show it. An independent poll in Texas, 75% of Texans agreed. In New Mexico, same thing. The polls have showed that, you know, the constituents want, you know, they want their, if they're in pain and a physician recommends it, they want to be able to use this. And unfortunately, just this week, same thing happened. That same kind of thing in Texas was tabled in the Agriculture Committee in the New Mexico House of Representatives and basically allowed to die there. And these patients are asking the same thing. Why have you allowed us to die here? You know, the governor of New Mexico, Bill Richardson, was one who was fervently advocating for the passing of this bill. And it looks like we've got another caller, so I don't want to keep them waiting any longer. Hi, caller. You're on Drugs, Crime, and Politics.
Thank you. Now, whatever would lawyers or the police have to gain by engaging in that? Don't get into it. I might jump around just a little bit. I hope it ties in pretty tightly at the end.
Okay.
First of all, y'all mentioned Colorado. Now, I wouldn't take too much of what Colorado has to say too much to heart. I mean, if you remember a few years ago, the college kids had riots because they weren't having enough fun. I mean, I think they're having about as much fun as anybody in this country. But when Milton Friedman comes out, and I can't. I don't know if y'all brought his name into that. You do have to take that seriously.
Right.
It was back in '88, I believe, was the first time this term popped up. The revolving door between the election of Bush and Dukakis. But the way I interpret that is, there's literally so many bets. So every time you take somebody in, you have to let somebody else out. Every time you let somebody out, you take somebody else in. So we really have to get our priorities straight on these crimes. In other words, the time for filing false charges, and I know there's a difference between knowingly and unknowingly, but, sprucing it up does not make it any prettier. Trumped up is, well, I'm just not a big fan of the Donald. It's time to do due diligence, which takes me into, you've heard of our chief's new camera initiative.
I'm not following you here, Carl.
Main Street. Cameras.
Oh, yes, cameras. Well, much as we might discuss it, it doesn't have very much to do with drugs, but go ahead.
It doesn't, or it
I guess it's
could.
the right to privacy kind of thing.
There are general issues that might be common.
I guess you can say that it's for any crime. That would be the only excuse that I could find for doing it. The excuse is if you're not doing anything wrong, what do you have to worry about it? And
right.
I kind of feel, if you have nothing to hide, stop buying clothes.
Well, there are a lot of very gray areas. It's quite obvious that the Constitution was partially put in place to regulate the power between the individual and the government and to protect the individual from intrusions by government.
Right.
It's also quite obvious that we collectively decide sometimes to sacrifice some of our rights. We can't drive down that street as fast as we want because there's a red light there.
Okay, which you're taking me exactly where I want to go. ABC had a nice little bit on Arizona earlier tonight, which is where our chief is from, by the way. And I did not TiVo this, but I grabbed these numbers really quick. They put up some cameras on the freeway, and they said they gave out 130,000 tickets at $200 a pop in the first 30 days.
Wow.
Now, either we're all criminals, or somebody needs to look at the law.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. It's going to be one of those focal points.
Right.
That people will be allowed to just...
And back for the cameras on Main Street, it is Mardi Gras season, so there was somebody out in Oregon that put out a $1,000 bounty on video of any, let's just say, elected official doing anything wrong. But I would much rather just see embarrassing photographs of them. It's Mardi Gras show, you know what.
Great.
Thank you, caller.
Thanks, caller. Thanks for that interesting commentary. And I guess he's right. To some extent, it does bring in the right to privacy issue. Even another thing I was thinking about that kind of relates to student drug testing. If you're not doing anything wrong, then, why ask? But that's just I don't know, I think that's kind of a misnomer. The government doesn't have a right to intrude into our lives and everything. And especially, if we don't think these things are wrong.
They do as long as we concede it and don't stand up for it.
Right. Well,
okay.
That's what the whole point of...
So here we are.
Yeah.
But I think it's particularly clear that for most people in the United States, their home is their castle. And that's where they would prefer not to be intruded on in particular. It might be extended to a dorm room in a university as well. Okay. One can argue the point. But the drug war, in the opinion of many judges, has virtually eviscerated the Fourth Amendment, that is to say, our protection from unreasonable searches and seizures, which would include both the invasion of our home and the forfeiture of that home for minor offenses. So there are large issues at stake of all type. I usually tend to try and focus on the practical failures of this simple decision. We had spoken earlier about the attempt to stop supply. And once you understand that the drug lord is going to make a huge profit and that that's what they've done, And that, for instance, if you buy a drug for $1 and sell it for $50, you got $49 to operate with, and only $1 or so is actually going to turn out to be profit. What happens to the $48 in between? And one of the things that's done with that money is that they have to hire a sales force. And it turns out that the sales force in the United States, according to the government, is between 4 and 5 million people. And if you look into that further, the government estimates that teen salesmen are about 1 million, which coincidentally is the same number of teen classrooms that we have. So we have virtually enough teen drug salesmen to have one in every classroom.
One in every classroom.
Okay,
Awesome.
now that's because we can't stop supply and have put a lot of money into the hands of drug lords who hire those people and pay them money.
Well, let's continue this discussion when we come back from the break of,
Okay.
how the money
What
cycle.
happens when you have teens selling drugs for 30 years? That's
Okay.
where we want to pick up.
Great. All right. We'll see you after the break.
It's time to play Name That Drug by its side effects. Swelling of the lips, bloating, death. You'll never get this in 10 seconds. This new medicine is undergoing trials in Canada. It's made from a sea creature. It's hundreds of times more powerful than heroin. It helps those in great pain, like cancer patients. This med also helps cure heroin addiction. They said that 100 years ago when heroin displaced morphine. Time's up. The answer, from the yellow pufferfish, tetrodetoxin.
This week in drug war history, February 24, 2000, members of the Belgian Parliament make a proposal to modify their laws in order to partially decriminalize the possession of cannabis and its derivatives. February 26, 1995, former mayor of San Francisco, Frank Jordan, is quoted in the Los Angeles Times, "I have no problem whatsoever with the use of marijuana for medical purposes. I am sensitive and compassionate to people who have legitimate needs." February 27, 1999, conservative William F. Buckley Jr. is quoted in the New York Post, "Even if one takes every reefer madness allegation of the prohibitionists at face value, prohibition has done far more to far more people than marijuana ever could." February 28, 2000, UPI reports that Spanish researchers said the chemical in marijuana that produces a high shows promise as a weapon against deadly brain tumors. March 1st, 1915, the Harrison Narcotics Act goes into legal effect, beginning prohibition of drugs. March 1st, 1999, the advice columnist Abigail Van Buren in her popular column Dear Abby writes, "I agree that marijuana laws are overdue for an overhaul. I also favor medical marijuana use if it is prescribed by a physician." This is Steve Nolan for the Drug Truth Network.
Hi, welcome once again to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. We're back from the break, and we have with us past president and co-founder of Drug Policy Forum of Texas, Jerry Epstein. And before we get back into the conversation, we have a caller, so we'd like to invite you to join us. Hello?
Hello, how are you tonight?
Good, how are you doing?
Good. The war on drugs, it'll never be won because there's too dadgum much money involved in it, and not by the people that are selling the drugs, by the people that are building the prisons, by the lawyers, by the cops, by everybody involved in it besides the drug lords.
Well, the drug lords, are also profiting, but you're absolutely right. It's almost like the prison is almost an industry now, and more prisons are being built, every year than schools are. How ridiculous is that? It's almost a teacher's salary to house a prisoner for a year.
5% of the world's prisoners in penitentiaries are in the United States.
It's 25%. Yeah, the U.S. incarcerates more people per capita than any other.
The 8 million people that are incarcerated in the world, 2 million of them are incarcerated in the United States. And how many of those are for
possession?
Possession.
Yeah.
So it's a big
nonviolent
business
crime
with the government.
Well, we've had a radical
Laws that have gone into effect that take your property and this, that, and the other. Jesus Christ.
It's a crying shame, yeah, and thank you for bringing up that point, caller. It really is. There's a revolving money cycle, and, and money feeds the drug war. But thank you for your comments. We really appreciate it.
Well, to follow up just a little bit on that, in 1972, Nixon put together his first, the only National Commission on Marijuana during his term. There have only been 3 that involved drugs in our lifetime, 1 for alcohol prohibition. This was the second. And that commission was selected, handpicked by Nixon, basically to confirm his policies, which they refused to do after they considered the evidence. And one of the findings that most impressed me was that they said that the amount of money that was being spent was so corrupting that to the people who both got to dispense it as favoritism and the people who got to spend it in their work was so great that they were afraid that the system had perpetuated itself. Now, the amount of money that they were talking about is about 1% of the money that we spend today that the caller is referring to. So the role of money in sustaining the drug war and the vested interests that are there and that are developed, and the prison industry is, of course, one excellent example, are a major force for resisting change. And the prison industry situation represents a dramatic shift from our traditions and our historical use of prisons. We were always ready to use prisons. In fact, some people thought we used them a bit more than other countries, even early. But we imprisoned at a rate of about 1 per 1,000. Okay, and variously, you can find that at 7 to 10 per 1,000 today. And that trend only really began in 1980. We put about 1 million people in prison historically. It took us till 1980 in the entire history of the country to get to 1 million, and we bumped to 2 million just since then.
Wow.
So, I mean, we've undergone a radical shift in the way we deal with crime and in who we put in prison and for how long we put them in prison.
Right.
And it's just been a major change, and it has had no payoff relative to countries that have decreased the numbers that they put in prison, or relative to some states in the United States have very low incarceration rates relative to Texas. And there's no different drug problems or crime problems. All they do is save a huge amount of money and don't disrupt forever lives where people may have a reasonable penalty to pay. But you don't put them in prison for 5, 10, 20, 50 years.
Right, and I'm glad you mentioned that. The European Dutch harm reduction model is one model to look at, and the statistics and the figures are there. California recently, a study was done. You know, medical marijuana has been legal there for 10 years now? Not
Where?
10 years. In California.
Oh, in California since 96, yes.
96,
10 years.
okay.
10 years.
And there hasn't been a significant increase in use in teenagers or anything. So the facts are out there. It's just, you know, if you want to look at it or not. We've got another caller, so let's go ahead and take that. Hi, caller. Welcome to Drugs, Crime, and Politics.
Sorry, we can't hear you, caller. We'll have you have static. Hang up.
Yeah, caller, I'm sorry. We can't. If you're watching, we couldn't hear what you were saying. If you can call from a different location, we would really appreciate it. But we were talking about the...
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say we were talking about the money situation beforehand.
Oh, yes.
And one of the things that you were talking about before we got on the air, I guess, is the supply and demand. And basically, you know...
Yeah. What this whole thing, the caller who wanted to protest outside representatives' doors, or the corrupting influence, or all the things we've talked about, and we'll come back maybe to the supply thing in just a second. One way to address this with representatives is through professional organizations trying to do and band together to look at this, which has been done at the local level in certain areas. And I know you particularly wanted to talk about what had been done in the Seattle area, in which Kings County, Washington, is it not?
That's right.
And the Kings County Bar Association then got together with people in the judicial community, got together with many people in the treatment industry, consulted with people in law enforcement.
Right.
And why don't you tell us just a little bit about that, because I think that's a more constructive way.
Okay, sounds good, Jerry. Yeah, the Kings County Bar Association in Seattle calls for legal regulated drug markets. And the way they've gone about it is amazing. They've literally just looked at the facts and, gotten everyone together. And before I get too much into this, I guess, we've got another call. So I guess we'll go ahead and take that because our producers are saying so. Hi, caller, you're on the air.
It's the same caller.
Yeah,
Cut it off, please.
Yeah.
We can talk. Caller, I'm terribly sorry, but we simply can't hear you.
Right.
Steve, please check that out before you put that through.
Right. Anyways, so the King County Bar Association, they've basically gotten a bunch of organizations together in the Washington area, and they've recently had a conference, which I believe Dean Becker went to, and he would actually be more up on, what this organization is about.
Well, once again, if people want to find out in detail, Kings County Bar Association has a website.
Yeah, kcba.org.
They have published actually 3 of these books, for different phases of the thing. And it's hugely detailed, trying to answer all the questions about what would happen if a state had the right to regulate a market, as opposed to federally. Or the principles involved also extend to the federal government if you wanted to employ the techniques. Right. And it's a very thoughtful suggestion to generate
They've gone through every single aspect of the drug war and just rationalized it to every aspect and how it pertains to citizens. Some of the associations that I want to mention that they've gotten, the Washington Academy of Family Physicians, the Washington State Medical Association, Psychiatric Association, League of Women Voters, just a whole gamut of concerned citizens there. And they basically, one of the main resolutions they passed was based on the finding that current drug control policies are fundamentally flawed, and that the unrelenting demand for prohibited psychoactive substances has fostered and strengthened highly profitable illegal markets. Yeah. So that relates back to the whole discussion of when you have illegal markets, when you have prohibition, that's if you were to rid yourselves of them, then you wouldn't have this illicit black market and everything. And it's an approximate cause of devastating societal impacts, including that the rates of prohibited substance use and of crime related to those substances has failed to decline and has actually increased during the current period of intensified law, and including children experimenting with more dangerous substances at younger ages.
It's always very interesting to look at the fact that all of these drugs were legal before 1914. Mm-hmm. We have an extended period of time when we understand how that system evolved and how it worked. And to compare what we go with today, when people say, what would happen if you ended prohibition? Kings County has attempted to lay out various ways to do that.
Right.
It's also very interesting to look at what happened historically when the drugs were legal as opposed to that. For instance, here in this last passage you were talking about the crime related with the substances. Well, there was no crime related with substance use of heroin or cocaine when they were legal. It's only after they became illegal that there was an association between crime and that. Right. And the crimes are not due to the drugs' effect on the mind. As the saying goes, Al Capone didn't commit crimes because he was drunk. He wanted the money. So money is at the core of that problem.
That's very true. Let's talk a little bit more about this. Let's take another caller here. Hi, welcome to Drugs, Crime, and Politics. Hi. Yeah, we can. Okay, sorry, caller, you're breaking up. Whatever you have to say, you can save it for another time, I guess. But going back to the King County Bar Association, what I was thinking about is they've basically, outlined and detailed this map of how they would see, a society after Prohibition. Reduction in crime and public disorder, improvement of public health. We were talking about how drugs, use of drugs should be more of a public health issue as opposed to a criminal issue.
That's the fundamental. I think that's the very fundamental issue that you need to look at.
Yeah,
that is, does law enforcement achieve what we as a society want it to relative to drug abuse? And the answer thus far has been certainly not. It's made it worse.
Right. Right, especially, people who have, or get to the point where they are addicted or anything, they shouldn't be thrown into jail. They should have, rehabilitation processes, and I don't think that incarceration helps in any way.
Well, what I wanted to say is it's important for people to understand, again, the central facet of our drug policy is to stop the supply of the drugs. That's why law enforcement primarily functions, is to stop the supply of drugs. Now, the first thing, for instance, we're not a society that is comfortable with numbers. But it so happens, and then we say things like there is an insatiable demand for drugs. People envision most of America running around hunting for drugs, when in fact, if you take marijuana out of the mix, no drug is used regularly by as much as 1% of the population. None.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So now if we talk about heroin, which is a very well-known drug, very few people know that heroin, first of all, is identical to morphine. It's simply a brand name from the Bear Company. Okay. Secondly, the demand for heroin can be met for the entire United States for a year with 16 tons of drugs. What does 16 tons mean to a person that doesn't have a feel for it? It means 100 pounds a day. You get that much on the dust of the people's feet that cross the border every day. 100 pounds is what fills one suitcase, and that's enough to supply the entire United States with heroin for a day. One suitcase filled with heavily sued.
Wow.
And you get that across 4,000 miles of border, planes, trains, 5 million tourists. We've asked the police to perform an impossible job, and we have no recognition of that fact. We don't understand it. The heroin that they're going to cross the border with started at the same time by the same company that had Bear aspirin, sold in a bottle of tablets for the same price as aspirin, roughly.
Right.
Okay. Now what? It sells for millions of dollars for, and so billions of dollars. And the profit margin is about 200 to 1 on heroin, which has a higher margin than everything.
Well, and if you look
so that's unstoppable.
You're exactly right. I mean, just comparing, I really like that analogy. That's, it relates back to the, harm reduction model, but just the numbers alone, I read somewhere that it's like the whole entire illicit drug market across the world, not just in this country, but is something like a $400 billion industry. And we expect law enforcement here to be able to overcome that and surpass that. Just by those numbers alone, it's impossible.
Well,
but so that point aside.
The numbers are, that is a number that the UN published in 1994, and it's a number that's in the record. It's almost certainly not true. The number's almost certainly a good bit smaller than that. But it's still sufficiently large to be exactly what you're talking about. If I pay $1 million a day in bribes to make sure that I get the profit at the end of the day, you see, that's $365 million. That's but 1/3 of $1 billion.
Right.
Okay, and we're talking many billions of dollars. And I talked about the fact that the drug is going to cost $1 and it's going to sell for, let's say, even only $50, and you're going to try to get $1 or $2 of profit. What happens in between? Several things happen in between. with that money. But one of them is you're going to bribe U.S. Marshals that get on planes in Houston, Texas, okay? And you're going to bribe police, judges. And if you can't bribe them, maybe you'll kill them. You'll maybe shoot the police chief like they just did across the border.
Right.
Or you'll kill Supreme Court judges like they did in Colombia. Or you'll kill all sorts of policemen that were killed there near Tijuana.
Right.
When it so happens that this particular border war here, if you move it over a few hundred miles, you'll see it repeated, just time. Now, what's that border war about? Well, it's about two competitive, opposed cartels fighting for control to try to get all this money that we're talking about. Now, consider that when you juxtapose it with the police efforts to take drugs. If I take drugs, I don't take any, I'm taking them from a cartel. So if you look at Cartel A and Cartel B and Cartel C, any time that I succeed in taking drugs, I have to take them from somebody. And if I take them from Cartel A, Cartel B and Cartel C are so happy. You cannot possibly take drugs away from one cartel without making... If you close down all of Toyota today, Ford's going to be overjoyed. There's not going to be any less drivers. There's not going to be any less reckless drivers.
Right.
Nobody's going to go without a car. They're just going to get it from a different dealer.
Right.
When you take drugs, you're not going to deprive anybody of drugs. If you take drugs away from Houston, can a clever businessman figure out a way to drive from Beaumont to Houston with a few pounds? Or from San Antonio or Dallas? Okay, and the center for supply of drugs to the entire eastern United States is Houston, Texas. Okay?
Wow, awesome.
Yes. Now, when you're looking at your bribed marshals and so forth and so on, do you see tons and tons and tons and tons of drugs being captured in Houston or the number 2 place, Dallas? No. Okay, so what's going on? All the drugs are channeling through us. We don't know what's going on.
No.
What we do know is we're not stopping the drugs.
Right.
We're not catching the drugs. And when we do get drugs, most arrests are for amounts of less than 1 gram. Again, the American people just sort of hazy about what a gram is. It takes 30 of them to make 1 ounce, the amount in a little tiny sugar packet, say.
Right.
Okay? And so when we take the amounts that we take, and it can be a few pounds, on the one hand, it's easy to get 16 tons across the border of heroin. On the other hand, what we take is very small compared to the 16 tons in the first place.
Right, and you're absolutely right about, when we're taking the 16 tons across or, however, 5 tons or whatnot, if you take that out of the market, if, say, that person was to be busted, there's just going to be another person springing up that's going to take that same amount right across. I believe it was either Nixon or Reagan that on the Mexico borders had this policy where they said, okay, we're going to stop every single car that crosses the border. That's in reference to. Can't remember which of those.
There have been several of these. One was Reagan's effort at the border along Mexico, particularly related to Mexico. There was another in New York in Nixon's day called Operation Intercept. And they were both fundamentally directed at marijuana. And the interesting thing about it is what it did was it took us from a position where most of the marijuana was supplied from foreign countries to a position where most of the marijuana is now grown in the United States.
Right.
We, the United States, if you consider drugs by weight, are the leading drug supplier in the world of drugs to the United States. Not Colombia, not Bolivia, not even Mexico.
Not even when it comes to cocaine or opium or something?
If you take them all and put them together, it's 16 tons of heroin, all comes from outside. It's 240 tons, roughly, of cocaine, nearly all from outside, although cocaine is just a class of stimulants. There are all sorts of stimulants available, and many of them made either legitimately or illegitimately in the United States, like the methamphetamine.
Right.
And the marijuana market, which they have so little control over that they estimate anywhere from 12,000 tons to 20,000 tons.
Okay.
That is to say, 1,000 times greater than the weight of heroin.
Right.
Now, we've got it growing in our backyards, we've got it growing in valleys, we've got it growing in national parks, and
Along
it's being
highways.
done in the United States. We haven't been able to stamp out or reduce the growth of marijuana in the United States. And we have the arrogance to tell them to stop 1/thousandth of what we can't stop.
Yeah.
And otherwise, we're going to shake our finger at them and not do economic business with them. And then they wonder why there's so much anger south of the border, or wonder why different movements in Bolivia or Venezuela begin to side, and more governments are coming to power, one of their principles being genuine, deeply felt resentment against the United States. If you go into Colombia with $1 billion and you fuel a civil war by, in essence, helping both sides. By the way, the drugs come across the border to us. We ship the guns to them.
Right.
Okay? So you have so many things that irritate them. Now, we spray the crops.
Plan Colombia. Right.
Do we spray the crops only that are illegal? Of
right.
course not.
We fly so high that we spray illicit and illicit crops. So there's actually, I can't remember the website, but there have been reports, that children are also being born with birth defects and, things of the like, because these pesticides are, which is supplied by Monsanto Chemical Company, Bell Helicopter out of HEB in Dallas-Fort Worth area.
One of the sites, and one of the best ones, is called WOLA. And, there's a lot of hysteria and there's a lot of exaggeration, and there are other people who do very serious business. And WOLA, and I wish I remembered exactly what it's Latin America is LA, and is one of the websites. And again, there are things like that. If there's so many different things that need specialization. Criminal Justice Policy Institute, for instance. If you want to know more about prisons, there are a variety of websites. Our website will at least link you to them. Mm-hmm. We may not have all the information on the site, but if you want to get to WOLA or JIPI or whatever, it's something the DPFT website is a way to link you to that information.
Great. Well, yeah.
So that's one of the answers to what does DPFT do. We try to provide you with credible information about it. And sometimes you have to decide for yourself who you believe about various things, but at least you get that point of view from reasonably responsible people, usually.
It's somewhat unbiased. It's basically construing the facts that you wouldn't normally get from your media outlets or, elsewhere. So.
See,
and I hate to say media outlets, because if you do the research, you can find the facts.
You can, but it is true that without having any opinion whatsoever about drugs or whatever, media likes sensationalism. It sells newspapers. And so media has been very complicit in conveying inaccurate information by conveying accurate information. Isn't that confusing? You tell the truth about an act that's extremely unusual, and if you don't include any balancing information about the general class of people, just because one addict goes crazy doesn't mean that that's the way most addicts behave. And indeed, our own history proves that most addicts can function pretty much like normal people if they're in a supportive atmosphere. And we deal with them. We see it all the time with people who use too much alcohol.
Right.
And just while we're on the subject, the government refers to addiction as drug dependency.
Houston media source, We the People Television. It's not just another good idea, it's your right.
Greetings, I'm Wanda Caraway. Welcome to Pathway to Wellness. Our show provides positive, accurate health and wellness information to help our audience live a happier life. On our show today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Earl Mendel. He's a registered pharmacist, master herbalist, and a PhD of nutrition. He's also an author of the Vitamin Bible. Welcome to Pathway to Wellness,
Wanda,
Dr. Mendel.
Pleasure to be on the show. It's a delight to be here, and I'm looking forward to it. We've got a lot of information we want to give to the public.
You know, Dr. Mendel, a big issue today is there's so many people are obese. I was just reading this article right here.
It's amazing.
And it's amazing, and this is from Time Magazine.
Girth of a Nation, right?
Right. It says Girth of a Nation. It shows even children here. This was in 1995.
Right. And now, 11 years later, it's so much worse than it was then. In fact, 2 out of 3 adults are overweight, a third of the children, and 40% of the dogs are